Yeah, welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, covering all things pro wrestling. As always, live from No Cell Studios on the Tavern, Acefield Retro. And joined on this amazing Thursday or Friday morning or Monday night, something like that, Chad. What's going on, dude?
Not a whole lot, man. Good weekend of pro wrestling. Impact, or should I say TNA, put on a good show with Bound for Glory. We'll get into all that. We got a legend giving us his retirement match date in Sting. And we got one of the lower promotions in America getting a pretty big TV deal. So we'll get into all of that stuff, plus tons of quick hitter news. So you guys stick around and get your fix with pro wrestling with us.
Just make it clear, guys, it is Monday night, and you guys know where to find us. We are knee deep on, recording in the depths of time, but we are enjoying every bit of all these news stories. And it's refreshing, as you said, to talk about stuff that isn't just focused on WWE, AEW. We're really focused on, the three topics here, the most diverse I think we've ever done. There isn't really, AEW, of course, you could tie it to Sting, but this is bigger than just one company. His history, goes throughout the lineage of wrestling. He is a benchmark of everything that wrestling is today. So I can't wait to get into it. And obviously the big story we're going to start with here is certainly going to be one that has everybody talking, good, bad, and indifferent. But let's get into big story number one.
Big stories. Story one.
Big story number one, we have the fallout from Bound for Glory at Cicero Stadium in Chicago. And man, we got results to break down. We got matches to break down. We got a lot of stuff to talk about what is the fallout programmatically. But the main story coming out of this is what came after the main event with Impact Wrestling announcing that they're going to be going back to Total Nonstop Action TNA. And this was done with an amazingly done video package with some quotes from different talent on the roster. Frankie Kazarian, who you know his history here, Alex Shelley, Eddie Edwards, Josh Alexander, Chris Sabin, all speaking here. So bridging the gap from past, present, and future. Man, we'll read some of the quotes in a second, but initial knee-jerk reaction on this. I saw your conclusion in the chat, but I want to hear you say it here.
I love it, man. Impact never felt right as far as a name, like Impact Wrestling. And just from a wrestling fan who, we have our social media, I always hated when you're tagging WWE, AEW, NWA, MLW, Impact Wrestling. I'm like, give us some three letters. You guys had it and you lost it. I love that they're going back to TNA. I think it ties them back to the lineage that started it all. It's what a lot of fans, I think we catch ourselves saying TNA still, at least some of us do. They were still getting TNA chants in the building at some of these shows. I think this is a good way to tie it all together and not make it so muddy. They've jumped around with a lot of different branding switches throughout time. I think when they switched to Impact, I believe it was a move to kind of separate themselves from kind of the chaos of the last regime that was running the promotion. Impact had TNA at the end, when the TNA that was releasing AJ Styles that didn't have money to pay certain guys, I think that TNA really had a stank on it. And it's a good way to, I think it's a move of confidence to me. It's a move that they've like, okay, we had our Impact run. We've separated ourselves from the chaos of the last regime. And now we're going to go back and own our legacy. We're going to own our history, and we're going to tie it all back up together. And we're different. The product speaks for itself. We don't have to trick you with a name change. Like, we are TNA. We're owning where we came from. I love the move.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And my immediate thought was, I brought it back to sports, which I always like to do. It reminds me when a team tries to switch up to a trendy new, uniform, and then eventually, no matter what, it feels right to go back to the classic. And TNA is where they started, 2002. And believe it or not, we're getting older, but that's over 20 years ago, guys. So there's a lot of nostalgia here for that brand. And for the first time since 2017, they're going to be known as those three letters. And I think you mentioned, I mean, a big piece of this is they were stuck in between. They were trying to reestablish themselves to run away from the history, because even the days with TNA had a lot of discombobulated things that people remember it for. There's a lot of the, Impact Zone memes with TNA attached to it. You could think about the days where crowds were light, storyline was even lighter, and there was a lot to be said about, the meme quality of the show. But I think as time goes on, nostalgia creates rose-colored glasses where you look through a lens of, some of the stuff that wasn't so good, we look back fondly. And we see that all the time now, years removed. I think there was a resurgence of people liking 1995 WWF with the new generation. Like, we all know that sucked, but for whatever people grew up watching that. So it made them fans of wrestling. I think there's a lot to be at here. This is a move that makes so much sense. It makes too much sense not to be done. And it's kind of crazy that we didn't even think they would do this, but it's all paired with the bigger picture. There's a lot going on here. Production value, they're upping their game. And I think it's all tied with story number 2, which we'll get to, but they're being challenged. I think we've talked about the benefits of sitting comfortably in the number 3 slot, understanding that, hey man, we can't reach up to AEW. Of course, we're not going to get to WWE. We're comfortable here. We'll do our things. We'll be happy with 120,000 people watching on a weekly basis, sometimes less than that, maybe 98,000. Now they're being challenged in their own landscape, where there's going to be a little in-house battle between two promotions that don't have a shot to get to number 2, but healthy competition is going to really breed a lot of good storylines on the underneath.
Absolutely, man. And those fans, they really did get nostalgic for the new gen era of WWE. They
anything worse than 95 WWF, and people look at it with rose-colored glasses, that is proof that nostalgia is blinding.
100%. I get Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. There's bright spots of any dark time. And TNA, even their dark days, had some bright spots in there. And I get fans like getting nostalgia childhood, but man, new gen, come on guys, like take those blinders off. It wasn't all that. They were comfortable at the number 3, and we'll get into it. Like you said, in number 2, they're being challenged now. It makes me wonder if they could see the changing landscape of pro wrestling, and they're like, we have to up our game, because tied in with this rebranding, going back to their lineage of TNA, it's not just, oh man, we have to compete with some of these, 4 and 5 spot promotions, so let's change our name back to TNA. It's also coming on the promise that their production value is about to up. Their look, as far as a live event, is supposed to increase just from quality and all of that. So I think bringing back the name is a nice way to tie it to history, but I don't think it's just that. I think that rebranding is tied to bigger things that's going to really freshen up this company, because, I think they're confident. Look what we have. Look what roster we've built. Now is the time to really go all in and give us a complete fresh change. And I guess one question I have for you, Ace, is with this rebranding, do you think a move like this brings old fans back? Do you think there's people that maybe have checked out, and will this garner any new attention outside of just, your diehard faithful Impact fans?
I think it kind of has to. Like I said, nostalgia brings people in. I'm sure there are people watching in 2002, 2005 that used to watch that wouldn't recognize that it's the same company. I mean, obviously you do your research, you go on the Wikipedia page, you could find it out, but there's something to be said about typing in Google TNA wrestling, where to find it, and then seeing that it's the same company with the same logo. Maybe it's not a 6-sided ring. That remains to be seen. We don't know if that's coming back.
I say leave that.
But there's a lot of those people that are not so much in the know that they can be like, okay, well, this was Global Force Wrestling, and this is now, it was Impact by Anthem. And that, just cut all that out. Streamline the history back to TNA, where it started as, a National Wrestling Alliance association with NWA TNA, with the weekly pay-per-views on Wednesday with Jeff Jarrett. So all the history there with the good comes the bad. But I think really, if you look at it through the lens, especially with the passing of time, the good certainly outweighs it. And it's worth using the name worth here, where Impact was building its own legacy in a short period of time that it had that name. But TNA holds so much more weight to the point where casual fans still call it TNA.
Yeah.
Those people didn't even realize the rebrand happened. I'm sure a lot of people were confused about what is Impact Wrestling. Isn't it the show? Isn't that like where they used to hear it? It's like naming, like you said before we went on air, it's like naming WWE Raw. Like they've always been TNA. It's just they're going to call themselves that again.
I hope they keep the Impact Zone. I even hope the show, the weekly show, is TNA Impact. I think that's a way to tie it back in. And like you said, man, there is a lot more bright spots. I feel like TNA always kind of had the stench of the death of WCW on it. Like this was for those fans that felt like they didn't have anything when WWE swallowed everything up. And it was always kind of the redheaded stepchild of pro wrestling, especially in those early 2000s. But man, 20 plus years with this brand, it's really been the promotion that cannot die. Dude, there was times when I would look for them in the 20 aughts, and they're like on Destination America, and everybody on the program, like, who are these guys? Because I was
TV,
Pop TV. Like, there were so many dark days where you thought, man, they're going under, and they just managed to continue. And I think that adds to the history of them that they're still around, because when you open the history book and you look at what they've done before, I mean, there's been some incredible stuff in TNA. Let's be honest. Like AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, for the common fan, that's where we came to know them as. I know that Joe got recognition in ROH prior, but his run, his feud with Kurt Angle coming over, Jeff Hardy had a pretty impressive run, Sting coming in, then you bring in the Dudley Boys. Bully Ray becomes a renowned singles guy, has that big run with Aces and Eights, one of the great storylines that no one really talks about. There's been so much good stuff. Like even Magnus, now known as Nick Aldis, when he was in there doing his thing, like Jeff Jarrett, obviously, there has been so much good stuff that this rebranding really, not that it made us forget hardcores. We know the lineage is there, but there's something just nice. It's almost like a physical way. Like we've all, the hardcore fans, we know the history's tied, but this is a physical statement. We're seeing it now. We're going to see it on all their branding. We're going to see it on all their promotional stuff, that TNA letters. It just feels nice. It feels real nostalgic, like we're putting the rose-colored glasses back on. And this time I feel like we're going to look at it differently, and we're going to see that this history isn't as spotty as what may, like you said, it kind of turned into a meme a little bit. TNA was kind of a 3-letter, 4-letter word, if you will. So I don't know. I'm pumped. I can't wait to see what they do. I can't wait to see all of the other little things that are attached to this rebranding. I want to see the new look. I want to see how, because I'm guessing it's going to be new color scheme, new lights, new lighting packages, new opening. I hope they keep the "We Own the Night" song, because I love that song, but for their opening of the show. But I'm excited for this venture back to TNA.
So the rebrand goes into effect starting with Hard to Kill 2024, which is taking place from the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, Saturday, January 13th. We have one match announced already for it, so we'll definitely talk about that when we go through the results. But we had a press release with some great quotes on it. And this is the quote on it. Company officials confirmed that the new year will launch a new look TNA wrestling that runs from the entrance ramp to turnbuckles, in the ring to larger, more prestigious venues, and much, much more. We got follow-up that Scott Demore will provide further details in a one-to-one interview with Tom Hannafin on the Facebook page. This is going to be happening Tuesday, October 24th. So Man, like we've been talking about this on Brace from Back. If you guys are coming along for the ride with us, 10 p.m. on Thursdays, that's the show that's on Thursdays.
Yeah.
We talk about everything with Impact Wrestling. And in the news about 4 or 5 weeks ago, they talked about production value. Bound for Glory was going to be the conclusion of what they're doing now. These bulk tapings, very fiscally responsible decisions that pair with taping 5 weeks at a clip in whatever city you're at. It seems like they're dipping their feet into the pond where they're going to say, we're going to take a risk on live attendance. We're going to take a risk that maybe we're going to do more touring. We're going to do more live events. That's not just pay-per-view driven, and production value. We see a lot of that end, and like they've for sure, like the lower thirds look like they're a little bit more polished. We see a lot more production and camera angles. But I think really what has happened with the creation of AEW is that this has been sort of showing a different way to do it, where everyone was trying to use WWE as this archetype of it's only done one way successfully. Nobody else does it a certain way. AEW certainly pulls from that playbook, but they do it their own way as well. And I think Impact has the benefit of looking up at both of them and saying, you know, I'm going to do it my own way with my own flavor, but I have the benefit of watching what made them successful to be able to run Wembley Stadium or be able to run, you know, countless football stadiums like WWE does. So they have, you know, a progressive mindset. Scott D'Amore, the team there, they're all understanding that this is a wrestling boom period where they're riding the wave from underneath. They're not carrying the lion's share of the responsibility, but they're certainly surfing the wave underneath with NWA, GCW. There is a starvation for wrestling. So Impact is, you know, now going to be TNA, and we're going to see them ride that wave into a popularity. Hopefully they reach heights that they haven't reached ever. I hope they challenge AEW. I really do. I don't think it's there yet, but I hope they do. It's good for everybody.
Absolutely. And one has to wonder, you know, I know there's a lot afflicted out there with Fed brain, and they think that, you know, WWE is the way wrestling is done. I mean, maybe at the highest level, that's the style that is at the highest level, but that's not the style of pro wrestling in a broader sense. That's what's beautiful about pro wrestling. You can do it so many ways. Like sometimes I'm in the mood for Al Green. Sometimes I'm in the mood for Slayer. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I want variety in my pro wrestling, just like I like variety in watching an action movie and watching a horror film. Like I love the variety of it all. And you have to wonder, man, I don't know if this happens if AEW doesn't come into existence. I really don't, because I feel like a bigger company coming in with a lot of eyes on it, on a major network, getting some steam behind it, and they're doing better than what fans like to think they are. Fans always want to queue up these ratings and say, oh, they're not doing this or that. But obviously they've sold out Wembley. There's a lot of things where it's like, damn, we can get to a point where you're doing things like that. I think it makes everyone else rethink their game. I think it makes everyone hungry for growth. We're seeing that with the NWA and this TV deal. It's like everyone's not resting on their laurels outside of the WWE and AEW world. I wonder if they would be resting on their laurels if you just had that Goliath at the top dominating, and that's it. And then a big, big void in between to the Impacts, MLWs, and NWAs. Do those promotions feel the need to play ball, to up their game? I don't know. But now with AEW, they're not so far out of reach like a WWE is, where I feel like it made the Scott D'Amores, the Billy Corgans, the Court Bowers, it made those guys really look and be like, man, we need to like get out of our comfort zone and push a little bit. We might be able to get a slice of this pie, because we've talked about it constantly on Wrestling Tonight, how the wrestling landscape is very it's a very profitable venture for cable right now. Cable's dying, we all know that, but the one thing that seems to be getting good ratings is live sports and pro wrestling. So when I'm in NWA and Impact, I'm thinking, man, if we step our game up a little bit, maybe we can get a slice of that pie. Maybe there is room for us to grow, even with WWE and AEW dominating this space. I wonder if this would have happened without AEW coming around. I really think AEW lit a fire under all the other promotions and showed them what's possible if you put your best foot forward.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of that, as you said, there's a lot of pieces of that pie to go around. That financially, there's a lot of stake there. You have an option where people that miss out on WWE and AEW, other networks are recognizing that, as we mentioned before, CW11 taking a risk with NWA and going out there, and that is a lucrative deal for NWA where they used to be on YouTube. Who's to think that TNA can't do the same thing? They have to be looking at Access, saying that they've outgrown that spot.
Yeah,
but you mentioned AEW challenging and really pushing people to their limits. And, again, doing Shot Nostalgia on Fridays, we use that as the launch point of looking at the history of wrestling and reading the 1988 newsletters, where the biggest news story that just dropped in 1988 was when Ted Turner purchased Jim Crocker Promotions that was struggling. And they were, live gates were down, viewership was down. They were struggling in comparison to WWF at the time. And it wasn't just because WWF was putting on a better product or they were hotter at the time. It was just because it was mismanagement. It was disenchantment with maybe management. And that moment right there in the newsletter where Ted Turner decided to, hey, man, I'll step outside TBS and, the Atlanta Braves. I'm going to try my hand at professional wrestling. That changed wrestling as we know it today, not because of the impact that WCW eventually had. It's because of the challenges it made to push WWE to a new level to get to this globalization of where we're looking at now. And the same can be said here. We're going to trace that red string from AEW's press conference at Jacksonville by the side of a pool. And it's going to show this was connected to it, that TNA has the ability to jump up and say, we can do this. And we don't want to be left in the dust, because it created, like I said, a boom period. We're in it right now, so I don't think people really see it. We are inside of that boom period where wrestling in its own way is as popular as ever. I mean, I just was at an independent show in Massachusetts, and those fans love pro wrestling.
Yeah.
Independent, professional wrestling doesn't matter. There is a fan base, and it's our age bracket that grew up nostalgic for it. But now we are clamoring for even more wrestling. And how could there be more wrestling on our plate? Well, they're going to push the limits and find a way to put it on TV if it's going to be profitable. You mentioned cable dying. They're relying on live sports. Football can't play 5 days a week. Basketball can't play every day of the week. They need consistent programming that will drive viewers. And everyone that looks at AEW ratings, as you mentioned before, and they said they should be panicking, they're still out shooting what would be in that slot anyway, and the demos are up. So
right.
You can't compare it to just what WWE is doing on USA or Fox. You have to compare AEW to what was airing there before.
Right.
And that brings eyes to the product. And that's only what Warner Bros. Discovery is looking at. Same thing here. Like, this makes TNA a lot more profitable to somebody else when eventually they sign a bigger TV deal, because they're going to follow in the footsteps of NWA. They're going to find someone that's going to take a risk on them. And hopefully it's on a cable company or a cable channel that has more reach than Access does. And I think they will, because with more production value comes more interest in the product.
Well, the funny thing is when these fans shit on AEW or WWE for low ratings, what they always want to hit that viewership number. Oh, only 870 people tuned in, blah, blah, blah. But if you look at, but they were number 3 in the spot. And that's number 3 in how many channels are there now?
Right.
Over 100. Like, if you're number 3 out of 100, I feel like your broadcast partner's pretty happy.
I would say
we're in the top 10. Like, we're doing good. We got our sponsorship people happy. People are tuning in. Eyes are on the commercials. We're good. The last thing I'll say before we get into this awesome card from Saturday, the one thing I love the most about the rebranding, about the just kind of the bravado of Scott D'Amore when he announced it. I mean, the dude was dropping F-bombs. TNA is fucking back. Like, it was so I love the bravado of it. When he was doing that, and just seeing all the wrestlers really rallying behind this, I love the confidence that this is coming from. I love that it gives me a sense that locker room is tight. That locker room believes in what they're doing. They believe in their roster. They believe in the stories being told. They believe in the path forward. And they believe that there's a big space to grow into. And when you have a company, a scrappy number 3, as we call them, the number 3 promotion in America, that's exciting, man. That's what got fans, myself included, so down when there was all the reports of the AEW locker room stuff. It's not that I'm upset that they're fighting in the back. Those things happen. It's just that when those things are happening, typically there's a big section of the locker room where morale's down. I don't feel morale being down in Impact or TNA now. I feel TNA is like, hey, man, we're ready to go. Future's bright. We're going back to our roots. I love that. That's exciting. The bravado and the confidence that comes with this announcement, I think is very, very exciting.
Yeah, and there's a pride to those 3 letters, and I think people are going to really rally behind it, and they feel challenged by what is our second story. But let's get to the Bound for Glory card in Chicago, Cicero Stadium. They opened up with Chris Sabin versus Kenta for the X Division Championship, and according to Cage Match in my research, it's their first ever singles match. They were on opposite sides of a trios match earlier in the year, but this is the first time they've ever locked up one-on-one. And the other kind of note here is Sabin set the record tonight with a 13th Bound for Glory match. And I mean, the dude's in his 10th reign as an X Division Championship run. So we might as well, at this point, maybe give his moniker being Mr. Impact, Mr. Bound for Glory, Mr. something, because this guy has been there as a stalwart. I want to talk about bridging the gap from TNA to Impact. He's the perfect example of it. We saw a great match here. Sabin got the pin after a clothesline from Hell, Michigan, and the cradle shock for his second successful title defense against Kenta. Kenta looked good here. He did tease the CM Punk go to sleep thing to get heat with Chicago crowd. Great opener, set the pace for the night. And, 2 legends going at it here. Couldn't be more happy with what they did in the ring.
Yeah, this was a solid opener. Dream match in some sense. I'm kind of hesitant to throw around that dream match title just because I feel like it gets thrown around a lot. Like any 2 really good guys come together, it's a dream match. Dream match to me is yeah. Like dream match to me is Sting and Undertaker. Like dream match, it's a Mount Everest high peak,
right?
But these guys are legends. It was a fun first matchup. Never seen these guys in the ring together, and I'm a big Sabin fan, dude. Like when the X Division was very, very young, I'm talking 05, 06 in that era, even a little before that, Sabin was one of my guys, man. He was, mixing it up with the likes of, the Sanjay Dutts of the world back then. And
yeah,
I love Sabin. And, he obviously went on to do Motor City Machine Guns and really made a name for himself there, but 10-time champion X Division. We're talking, we led with legacy in TNA and bringing that back up. No one holds more legacy with this company than Sabin. Sabin's right there with the best of them. He's been around. He's been doing his thing. And I think this X Division run here recently, he's really brought some prestige on that belt. Not that it didn't have any, but I feel like when you have a champion who's held it so many times and has kind of became the face of that belt, it adds more weight to me. And to see him mixing it up with a New Japan legend like Kenta, it was a hell of a way to kick off Bound for Glory.
Yeah, and the fluidity of Chris Sabin to be utilized in the X Division in the World Championship picture from the tag division, be utilized.
He can float. He's
and that's what makes all of them.
Yeah.
Like even we'll talk about Shelly too. Shelly does the same thing, and that's a hard thing to do. And I don't think any other roster has been able to accomplish that. I can't see in WWE or AEW even someone being able to float from both sides.
Dude,
it's a remarkable way of doing things.
Yeah, not to cut you off, but this is the equivalent of if in 97 you had Shawn Michaels holding the world title and you had Marty Jannetty rocking that Intercontinental title and they were just running roughshod. You've got it doesn't happen when you have a tag team kind of go off and do their singles stuff. Not that they had some big barbershop moment where they broke up, but like It is the equivalent of a tag team and both guys holding gold and kind of running at the top of their division. It's fun. You don't see it that often. Typically, there's the Marty Jannetty effect. There's that one guy goes off to stardom and one falls into obscurity. Don't tell Motor City Machine Guns that, because they are blowing that out of the water. They're doing their own thing and they're crushing it.
Yeah, and there was no monumental breakup. They're still tagging. They're still they were just recently tag team champions themselves. So
I love that.
And I'd imagine they're going to hold gold again. Like, that's the other thing. That's the great thing about the way TNA does things. But we also had a Monsters Ball match, PCO taking on Steve Macklin, and Rhino.
This was shocking, dude.
I'll admit I was completely wrong on Brace for Impact. We gave our picks. This was a fun match, as you'd expected. PCO doing ridiculous stuff, wearing tacks on his head, his shoulders, was really showing out here. We know that notably his contract is up October 30th. So as of record time, 10:22, it's 10:23 when you're listening to this, or 10:24 on audio. He is on his way out by all accounts and purposes. So interesting enough, especially with guys like Macklin, Moose. I mean, Rhino is on the other side. He's a veteran. He doesn't really need to be put over. There's bigger plans for Moose and Macklin. I thought for sure they're going to have to win, but PCO wound up coming out victorious here.
Yeah, and I know you just, said you got it wrong on Brace for Impact Thursdays, 10 p.m. I got to take up for you guys, though, because I think any well-respected, knowledgeable wrestling fan would read the tea leaves of this match and say, yeah, PCO's on his way out. There's no way they're going to put him over. But this just kind of goes to show you what Impact, sometimes they take the swerve on you, and I kind of respect it a little bit. There's a little bit of Scott D'Amore and the powers that be looking at PCO, looking at this legend, looking at how much he's given to the promotion and being like, we're going to send you out on top. This is a match that is tailor-made for a guy like PCO. This is a match, Monsters Ball. I mean, this is a match that really the likes of Abyss made famous. These crazy big piss and vinegar monsters come in and just dominate. I mean, it's Monsters Ball. So it does seem fitting that a guy like PCO would win it. It shocked me because, all reports say he's done with Impact. So do you think this is a booking? How do you look at it, Ace? Because on one hand, you're like, oh, they're sending him out with respect. Like, there's no bad blood. He's leaving, but we're going to send you out on top. Or do you go the traditional route and say, yeah, but it was his duty to kind of put over the next guy on his way out? How do you look at this?
Well, it's an anomaly for sure. I don't think this has any precursor on any deal that's been made. I mean, even we've said it before. We know in TNA that they don't. When you're gone, you're not gone forever. We saw Nick Aldis come in, then he was out. We saw Mickie James leave, and now she's back. And we heard people working without contracts on just handshake deals. This could be the same here. PCO has had legacy there at this point. He has made a home there. The way the match was structured, I thought I'd be a little bit more unhappy with it, especially with Moose destined for a world championship picture match somewhere down the line. Steve Macklin, former world champion. The way it was done was pretty clever. I thought they did a good job of exposing really just the loophole that this match provides of all the weapon stuff, and PCO being a monster, and then him getting the win made sense in that world. And I don't think Moose and Steve Macklin looked worse for wear. And that's all I was asking. I didn't want them looking weak going into Hard to Kill, or weak looking into going into these, because these are two important parts to your main event scene. I think Moose, he'll eventually use that Collier shot somewhere, or the Feast or Fired world title shot in his possession. And Steve Macklin is a guy you can heat up when needed, because he was a guy who stepped in a time of need when Josh Alexander was hurt. So you want to keep those guys strong. I think they did this. This was a fun fan service match where people enjoyed it in the building. So
I agree.
I have no issue with it.
It would have been different if it was PCO versus Moose, and then he went over on Moose one-on-one. But when you throw four guys in the mix and it's a gimmick match like a Monsters Ball match, I feel like it leaves you a lot of wiggle room to have notable, reputable guys take an L and it not affect the bigger picture.
So we also have the tag titles on the line. Chris Bay and Ace Austin defeated the Rascals to win the tag titles. So going into this match, Wentz and Miguel were undefeated as a duo, 8-0, dating back 4 years. So this is their first loss as a tandem. And these four have shared the ring in the past around the world. This is only their second tag match ever against each other, and first in Impact. So this was competitive, everything you'd expect from this match. I mean, this feud has been well built. This isn't just about athleticism and work rate. This has a lot of heat to it. And this was a crowning moment for ABC getting those titles back after being, cheated and duped all through the last couple months. And it was a nice moment for ABC to get it back. And this is not the end of it, man. There's a lot of different tag teams. You mentioned last week in passing, it would be awesome to see the Grizzled Young Veterans get involved in this, because there's about 5 teams all vying for the titles, and the Rascals are at the center of it. It's going to be interesting to watch them chase. It wouldn't shock me to see them get the titles back at some point, maybe in the next 2 months, because that's how they're doing this run and gun booking, what they're doing with the tag titles, and it's been fun.
Yeah. Speaking of X Division champions, Ace Austin, I'm blown away by the dude because, he does a lot of we have a local independent here that he works, Conquest Wrestling, that Ace Austin comes in, and we actually sponsored a match where Ace Austin came and put on the X Division, put the X Division title on the line, and the Tavern sponsored the match. He's a guy that they really pegged for, he was going to be a top singles guy, and held the X Division title, had a lot of fun gimmicks. They bring Chris Bay in. If people remember when AEW first came into existence, Chris Bay was someone that Cody Rhodes had talked about in press conferences in the early days of All Elite Wrestling, of them wanting to go after him. And the funny thing was, as soon as he went public with AEW, like, there's a guy out there, Chris Bay, we really want him. As soon as he goes public with it, Impact sweeps in and signs him. So it's like, the fact that they put Chris Bay and Ace Austin together, no one knew what that was going to be. And they've really made, I think, a top tier tag team out of 2 young, bright, just heat seeker talent. Like, and it feels like they've always been together. Like, they're so good together. It makes me forget about Ace Austin being that kind of the uncrowned prince of TNA, because they were really pushing him where I thought, hey, this is going to be a main event, like, world champion one day. And I think he still probably will be. The dude is killer talented, but man, this feud is not over. This match was one of my favorite on the card. The Rascals, we talked about when Wentz came back into the company, I was so stoked. He looked rejuvenated. I'm a big Trey Miguel fan. So I hope this continues. I don't know if it continues in the here and now. I think both could kind of go off and do some other programs to elevate some other tag teams. But like you said, if GYV, Grizzled Young Vets, come into this company, man, it could add such fun matchups. We even have Subculture. They won that title not too long ago and dropped it. And what's the crew? The name is slipping me, but I want them to get a bigger push with John Schuyler.
Yeah,
the Good Hands. Man, Good Hands. That's like FTR. Oh yeah, 1A to 1B.
North Carolina boys.
Yeah, dude. John Schuyler really, really close with Dax and Cash. Dax and Cash was in Tony Khan's ear to sign John Schuyler. I think it's good that he went to Impact, though, because he would have got lost in the sauce of AEW. But man, elevate the Good Hands, because that's another squad. You've got 4 tag teams right there. You've got ABC, you've got the Rascals, you've got Good Hands, you've got Subculture. You throw in Grizzled Young Vets and other tag teams. Like, this is a healthy tag division.
Well, also, too, we were talking about the Motor City Machine Guns and being interchangeable in the main event. These guys, the Rascals, I mean, both those guys, Wentz and Miguel, we mentioned, Trey Miguel is a former X Division champion. You mentioned about Ace Austin, but any one of these guys can be split from the tag team and thrown into the main event scene. And I think that is this delicate balance that I think companies in the past have felt that they had to break up tag teams to push them to the moon. We've seen great tag teams broken up for main event pushes. The Rockers, of course, like it launched historically Shawn Michaels into superstardom from there. But I think Impact is bucking the trend of you have to break these tag teams up and they can't be a tag team and a main event player at the same time. It's just not true anymore. And
what's funny, it's funny. Impact can do this, and we accept it and they get away with it, for lack of a better phrase. But in my opinion, and this might be unpopular opinion, the way Impact has made us buy in to Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin being singles champions in lieu of a breakup. No breakup happened. They're doing that better than WWE did when they tried to do it with the New Day. When when Kofi had Kofi Mania and won the title, and they just botched that. And then Big E had the title for a minute, and it just was kind of forgettable. In WWE, it almost feels like their booking is made in such a way where you almost have to have a breakup for fans to be like, okay, now we buy you as a singles champion. Because I don't feel like no one truly bought it. Like, I think everyone bought the Kofi Mania when it was first happening and we were pushing for it to happen, but then it fizzled out. Like, once he got it, it fizzled out. Once Big E got it, it fizzled out. When Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin got these titles, it did not fizzle out. It grew and we bought in. So it's just like kind of I don't know if it's the way the companies book and the way the fan bases expect things to happen, but it just goes to show you, like, Impact can get away with things, I think, a little more than what a WWE booker can get away with.
Yeah, and I think Kofi's reign ended with the pressure of being on Fox for the first time. Like, Lesnar squashed him on that first ever SmackDown on Fox. So they don't have the same people that are whispering in their ears. And, they trust the process here, being able to say, you know what, Shelley, go out and do your thing, establish yourself as a main eventer. Not that he wasn't, but the fact that he's holding this title and bringing such prestige to his own legacy in the TNA legacy, it's amazing. But let's get to Will Ospreay versus Speedball Mike Bailey. And this match was, I mean, we don't want to throw around dream matches because this is not a dream match per se, because they have locked up before. We mentioned before at Rev Pro, they've wrestled elsewhere, but this iteration of Will Ospreay is probably the best form of any professional wrestler in the world today. This had a big fight feel. I mean, this was the fans involved, and these guys went from a sprint from 120 miles per hour. They slowed it down for a second to slow the pace and build some heat. But this was a perfect launch point for the casual fan if they happen to be tuning into Bound for Glory for the first time and they just want to watch because old Billy Goat was there. If they saw Will Ospreay versus Mike Bailey, how could you not be impressed with what you saw from Speedball? He absolutely kept pace with Will Ospreay. A lot of moments, he was the guy getting the shine. That might be a credit to how Will Ospreay and Speedball showcased this match and structured it. What match was great. Conversation continues about this year, 2023, that Will Ospreay is having. There is absolutely nobody else in contention for Wrestler of the Year for me. There's no one even within spitting distance. Maybe Bryan Danielson for the matches he put on, but he missed some time due to injury. I just think Will Ospreay is operating on a different plane right now, and he's redefining what it means to be Wrestler of the Year. So, star-making moment for Speedball Mike Bailey, who continues to show what he can do, and he deserves recognition on the biggest stage. This match was fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic match. Probably the best match on the card. It seems like that's pretty standard when it comes to Ospreay. Dude just shows out. Dream match, no, but not in a bad way. I think matches like this are sometimes better than dream matches, because matches like this, you have two guys who have yet to break through the ceiling of the mass casual audience, who are absolutely just rocketing to the top of must-see performers. You've got Ospreay, who definitely has more cachet with the casual wrestling fan than a Speedball. So you're giving that rub from Ospreay to a guy who hardcores know what Speedball can bring. So we're excited because it's essentially two young guns. I mean, I know Ospreay's like he's top of the top 3 wrestlers on the planet right now. But as far as just the casual flipping through the cable channels, they don't know the weight of him. So you're putting someone who the hardcores know is the guy in Ospreay. You're putting Speedball with him, who's been ripping it up in GCW, ripping it up for Impact, TNA. So I love matches like this. It takes me back to UFC back in, the late 2000s when you would get two lightweights, two welterweights who are just killers, who are on this trajectory of climbing to the top, and then they meet and you're like, holy shit, I don't want either one of these guys to lose, but there's got to be a winner, there's got to be a loser, and then at the end of the match you're like, both of these guys got something from this. And I think this is one of those matches where if you look at the promotional stuff coming out of Bound for Glory that is promoting this rebranding of TNA, there's a bunch of faces on this banner that they have. And obviously it's the faces you think you're going to see, like the champion Alex Shelley, like Trinity, like Mickey James. Those stalwarts are on there, but over to the right, who's on that promotional package? Speedball Mike Bailey. I think TNA has a lot of big plans in store for Speedball, and judging from what Ospreay said, TNA's in the running to land Ospreay. I think this is a little bit of businessman coming out in Ospreay, where he's playing the AEW, he's playing the TNA, and I'm sure he's playing New Japan, where he wants a bidding war where he can get paid handsomely for his services. But this match was incredible. Go check it out. Go watch it. Both of these guys have unique styles. They matched up so well. And as far as the week in wrestling, I mean, this is a marquee match to watch. If you watch one match, This is one of those matches you want to watch.
So I'm going to skip ahead quick to Dave's raves, just because there's a spot to just segue into, because I'm forecasting we have a lot of quick hitters. I just want to mention what Dave said about Will Ospreay's year in the newsletter. And he said, this leads to a major question. What is the single greatest in-ring year a pro wrestler has ever had? It's hard to measure because in the past, wrestlers worked far more dates. For example, Flair legitimately did more than 300 matches a year, and most of them would have ranged from very good to great. And most were in televised or tape, and he did this year after year. It's doubtful anyone has had many matches on that level in a given year. Although I suppose Miami Toyota in the heyday of All Japan Women would have given him a run for his money, because you didn't work the number of singles matches that Flair did. But he said, but as far as one person dominating the match of the year category, this will be interesting. He said Saber's name is added to the list of singles matches that are legit match of the year contenders. That includes 2 with Kenny Omega, Naito, Okada, 2 with Shingo Takagi, 1 with Tsuji, not to mention close calls at Robbie X, Leon Slater, Taichi, David Finlay, Marufuji, and now add Speedball Mike Bailey to the list as written before that match. Will Ospreay's doing historic stuff here, and I understand we're in our little echo chamber of work rate and understanding the what his shadow is casting over what wrestling is right now. We're watching something special, and I think he recognizes too. That's the foresight that a guy like Will Ospreay has. He recognizes that where Speedball is right now, in this moment where he was wrestling him in Chicago in front of Cicero Stadium, red hot for the match, was where he was a few years prior. And I think he recognizes that when he burns out and he can't wrestle the same style anymore, Speedball might be the guy to take that lantern and carry it for him. Because I really believe he has that work rate that resonates with, if you put a machine behind him and give him reverence with the casual fan, he's captivating, man. He's getting better on the mic. He has the ability to showcase his athleticism in the ring. He's unique, which is hard to do in pro wrestling. I can't say enough good things about Speedball. Of course, Will Ospreay will give him his flowers every day, but I've been blowing that trumpet, for the longest time about Speedball Mike Bailey. I think he deserves to be on a big stage, and TNA might be the stage he's provided because they're becoming bigger themselves, which is fantastic. But just wanted to read that part from the newsletter.
No, yeah. Speedball, I've been high on him since me and Mike were doing the fucking GCW show, and he was just coming in week after week and blowing me away. And the fact that I love that a guy like him is in a TNA, because they need those guys, those young guys there. And it shows you Impact, TNA, they're not just leaning on the Dangos, the former WWE guys, the AEW, they're making their own way, and they're making their own talent, and having a premier top guy like Ospreay come in and just mix it up with Speedball. That goes to show you everything of what they see in Speedball.
Well, speaking of premier top guy, top woman, Jordan Grace won the 20-person Call Your Shot Gauntlet, and this was the first ever woman to win this. This was a fun match. I mean, everyone pretty much expected Jake something's crowning moment. That's what Colton predicted. I seemed like that was almost forecasted in a way that was predictable. I thought potentially Eric Young. Those guys had good shots at doing this, but eventually it was Jordan Grace getting a big rub here. Other fun parts of this match, Matt Cardona, Juventud Guerrera, my good friend from Independent Wrestling. He was out there. Sunny Kiss made her debut. So this was a fun match that eventually showcased Jordan Grace winning that 20-person Call Your Shot gauntlet by pinning Bully Ray to get the victory, which was cool to see. Again, shows Bully Ray giving back to the business and being a guy who's in 2023 and understanding he's in 2023, not these old heads screaming at the clouds. For all the shit that Bully Ray gets, this is a guy who understands his role in this roster, and he played it perfectly here. And we also have a match for Hard to Kill being announced. She immediately challenged Trinity for that Knockouts Championship in January. So we're going to get that match. We have a match to build towards. We have 3 months to go. And this was a swerve in a good way. I think at this point, I didn't think it was possible. I understand it was an intergender match, but I didn't even consider it because they were always just setting up a new challenger for Trinity or eventually Mickie James, whatever way they decide to go. But Jordan Grace, she just came back. I feel like her return has been understated. People haven't really discussed her, but she's an important part to not only the Knockouts division, but the whole thing that is being built here in Impact, because she is a presence as far as women's wrestling goes.
100%. She is one of the most unique women's wrestlers in the game right now. And I think she has slowly but surely over the last 5-6 years, she has staked a claim in TNA Impact as one of the premier forces in that division, in that company, honestly. Yeah. Like, she's completely transformed herself into just, wow. She looks like a killer, a stone cold killer. And I didn't see this coming at all, and in the best way, because what a way to set up your Hard to Kill women's world title match. I mean, Jordan Grace versus Trinity, and Jordan Grace is a former champion coming in to challenge the hot new item that's been carrying that strap for a while. This is an exciting way to build that match. I'm excited to see that program too.
We also have the Knockouts Championship on the line. Trinity defeated Mickie James to retain. This was, what you'd expect. It felt like a main event between two women that gave it their all. And, Trinity eventually got the tap off her Starstruck submission, and she reapplied it twice for more leverage. And this had people asking more questions and really securing more answers about Mickie James, and especially with her husband being over in WWE. Is this just a one-time kind of crown Trinity, especially where there was that overhanging theme of Mickie James never lost the title. She was injured. So maybe this is just her doing good business with a company that she loves and she wants to establish them on her way out. Or will she be here to stay? Remains to be seen. I think Mickie James has the ability, and really she has the leverage to write her own legacy where she wants to finish it. I could see, obviously, WWE perceives her in a very big way that, she got that Rumble moment all the way back. She was the one that secured, being able to bring out that Impact Knockouts Championship on screen. Like, she's the only person that was ever able to do it. Now that Nick Aldis is there as a pretty important piece of what they're doing programmatic wise, I could see her leaving. But this match was good. I think they do a good job of making the Knockouts Championship feel like a world championship, and that was definitely the case here.
Yeah, I thought it was a good match. I thought it was necessary to keep Trinity rolling. I thought this was a way to kind of clean up where Mickie never lost that title, have her drop it. If you look at the promotional stuff, Mickie features heavy. I don't think she's going to run off and follow Nick to WWE. Yeah, they brought her back with that Impact title to feature in that. But there's also the way she exited. I know everyone always brings up the trash bag and all of that, but I think letting her come back in that Rumble with the title and all of that stuff, I think that was more of righting the wrong of the trash bag situation.
True. Good point.
But I think the reason she left that company was because it's the way, and it's not just on her. I think it's the way WWE handles legends. Look at the way they handled Kurt Angle. Look at the way Edge talked about, hey, I wanted to work more. They didn't want me to work. They wanted me to be kind of like a featured talent here and there when they needed me. I want to work weekly. I think Mickey coming out with that Impact title says a lot about her mentality. When she brought that Impact title to WWE programming, it says a lot about her mentality because she used that platform to elevate Impact and put that belt in the minds of fans. So I think her legacy is more important in Impact. I think she holds more weight in Impact than she does in WWE. I think she can help pro wrestling more being in Impact, and especially if they're rebranding to TNA, she is a direct line to that old lineage. I feel like you have to keep Mickey. She doesn't have to hold the world title again, but just to have that veteran presence in the women's locker room, that's important. So I think she's going to stick around in Impact, and I hope she sticks around in Impact because she's more, to me, she can give back to the business more there.
So we had our main event here, the Impact World Championship on the line, Alex Shelley versus Josh Alexander. And this, stop me if you heard this already. This match was a masterpiece between two guys that know how to work a main event level match. And the closing portion of this match with Alexander trying to get the ankle lock on Shelley and then eventually got the leg lock and he escaped. And we had the stuff playing around with the accessories. Like this became part of it where Alexander, his headgear was slapped off his head, which feels like he was a little bit vulnerable here. Shelley hit the shell shock, but he didn't go for the pin. Then he kicked Alexander's mouthpiece out of his mouth just for emphasis. Then he hit another shell shock for the definitive clean win. So, man, I couldn't have been more wrong here just because I expected, first of all, if this was going to happen, that they wanted to make sure Shelley, if he wanted to establish his run, maybe he would do it in nefarious ways. He cheated, low blowed, maybe Sabin got involved, something like that to advance the story. They went the other direction where Alexander is going to be a little bit more vulnerable. He's the walking weapon, but he's also the walking wounded. He has to kind of see if he's up at the same level he was when he left. And that's an interesting story to tell. I trust the process where they're going. We're going to get Alexander versus Shelley to kind of, while he's licking his wounds at the TV taping. That's going to be next Thursday. So make sure you guys don't miss that. But we're going to get Shelley defending the title on the same tapings against John Gresham. He's not losing the title to Gresham. But man, they're furthering the story with Shelley than I thought they would. I think they're taking this past the point. Inevitably, we talked about in the debate, Josh Alexander is the guy you want carrying that torch again. The fact that they extended it has me intrigued.
I think it's the right move. I think, hindsight's 2020, but looking back at the way they built this, there was a lot of the story being told of, I'm not just a transitional champion. I think this is a way to solidify Alex Shelley as a true top guy. And plus, man, Alexander 100% never lost his belt, dropped it with an injury, comes back. It did feel a little quick. It felt a little disrespectful to the story process if you just brought him back and he instantly gets it back. I like a babyface facing all obstacles to get that gold back. It's going to be that much more impactful if he has to fight and scrape and claw to get that belt back. When he gets it back, it'll mean more. I don't think the pop would have been as big if he just got it here. Mm-hmm. I want to see him struggle. It's kind of the same MO that WWE is doing with Cody Rhodes right now. Like how we thought he was going to get at Mania and he didn't, and they're really making him work for it. So I think long term, this is beautiful because we all know how good Alexander is. He's getting that belt back eventually, and now you have just solidified Alex Shelley as he didn't have to win by heelish tactics. He just won, which instantly is like, okay, this guy's legit. Like he's a threat. He's not just going to get pushed over by the former champion. He came in and beat the former champion. Now there's a sense of legitimacy with the world title reign, and it makes me hungry to see what is it going to take for Josh Alexander to get that belt back.
Yeah, and I think we're eventually going to see Alex Shelley go full-blown heel. He's been hinting at it. I was surprised it didn't happen here, but I think we're going to see it because I think we're seeing that the sit-down interview, he was definitely confrontational. He was caustic. He didn't have the same level of just reverence for Alexander. And yeah, I don't know that we were having this debate on Brace for Impact just about will it be damaging to Shelley's reign if he was to lose here? And I guess you can kind of make arguments for both sides that if he was to lose to Alexander, then he would, by definition, look like a transitional champion because of no matter the length of the run, it's just because he was keeping it warm. So I understand really what was at stake here. I just thought they would have figured out a way to, I don't know, turn him full-blown heel. And I again, trust the process. Maybe they didn't want to turn him heel yet because he still got the babyface reaction. The fact that he wasn't heel, people definitely felt like they were a little bit more behind Josh Alexander during this match, but they were excited for both these competitors. So maybe since it's their WrestleMania, they didn't want to have this, I don't know, downtrodden moment where the fans didn't go home happy kind of thing. Maybe they just wanted to have a mutual respect type of thing. And then we're going to advance the story maybe at a different pay-per-view or maybe on an Impact taping. Maybe as soon as this Thursday, we'll see Shelley go full-blown heel, be cocky that he beat Alexander after all this pomp and circumstance. The king is back and he couldn't defeat me. So I'm interested to see where they're going. The main event is as crowded as ever. They have an ability to transition where they want to go. Don't forget, you have Moose warming up the bullpen. Will Ospreay wants to hang around for a while. Like, this was supposed to be a title match against Will Ospreay because Alexander was, maybe he'll have something to say about, dude, you couldn't get it done. Now I don't get a title shot.
Right.
It has me intrigued.
Yeah. I think the most intriguing thing for me right now with TNA is they don't truly have a main event, despicable top tier heel right now. So you know it's coming. Is it going to be Alex Shelley? Is it going to be Moose stepping back into that void? Is it going to be Bully Ray rekindling some of that he had with Josh Alexander, where he jerked Josh Alexander's wife over the guardrail? Like, they have really good baby faces at the top, but who's going to step into that really? They've got some heels, but I'm talking like the king heel, who?
Yeah.
WWE's got Roman Reigns. AEW has, I guess, Christian is kind of that despicable top tier heel. Who's stepping into that void in the world title picture? And what can Alex Shelley truly do to solidify himself as that, if he is the one earmarked to be the heel of the company? That's the really intriguing storyline to track with Impact right now. I think
it's in there. I could see little spots of, man, he could play a great devilish heel and make sure he makes everybody feel lesser. Like, I'm excited to see when they eventually go full blown, because I think they will. It's right there. They wouldn't be dropping these hints if it wasn't there.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to big story number 2.
Big story 2.
So we referenced this before during big story number 1, but we finally have this TV deal that Billy Corgan was referencing. They signed the deal. NWA will be on the CW. So he was teasing last week during the appearance on Busted Open Radio that his promotion had recently signed with a, quote, top 20 network. So House of Wrestling said both TV deals confirmed with the CW. We're going to be getting an official announcement pretty relatively soon about where we can find them TV-wise, where you can, the time slots, all that. So this is believed to be one of the 2 deals for the rights of NWA Power, and the other is for a reality TV series based on what happens behind the scenes in the NWA. So, man, there's a lot of stuff. NWA has been in the news. We've been covering them a lot of times negative, unfortunately. We've been talking about just how fans feel about the booking, maybe just kind of decision-making process of Billy Corgan, him going back at some of the fans that are clapping back at him.
The whole Nick Aldis situation.
Tyrus, all that. But in late August, NWA was talking about their own production upgrades and declared it was entering what they call the new era. We kind of scoffed at it like, okay, we'll wait and see. The production upgrades were reportedly made in anticipation of this new TV deal. They were looking, maybe they were in talks with the CW. As we mentioned, maybe other TV promotions were kind of wooing them. But as we know, as I mentioned last week and earlier today, that Women in Wrestling, WOW, is on the CW affiliates, and it outdraws Impact by a lot, man. They draw between 250 to 450,000 people per episode, and that's Women in Wrestling. And I'm not trying to disparage them. They put on quality wrestling. It's not destination TV by any means for me or for wrestling fans, but there is a market with that channel, and that, if they're getting those numbers, who's to say that, NWA can't top it by at least 50,000 and pull up, 500,000, which is, man, if you think about where they were this time last year with distribution being digital and trying their hand at like the pay per watch on the Fight TV app and all that stuff. This is also tied with this old territory system that's being announced at NWA, because EC3's Exodus Pro Wrestling as being rebuilt as NWA Exodus Pro Midwest. This might show, we might get showcase of local independents that might be on the CW. You know what I mean? Like this opens up Pandora's box a little bit, where you can say you could have an outlet for a local independent in your area, local independent in my area gets a little showcase if they're to be endorsed by NWA.
Yeah, and then there's also, I think you had mentioned last week the early kind of the rumblings of possibly Beyond Wrestling joining that NWA territory system. Beyond is a great independent from the Northeast. Last week we talked on Wrestling Tonight about Billy Corgan going on Busted Open Radio and kind of floating that, hey, we have a TV deal, but I'm not announcing the channel. And we both rolled our eyes a little bit like, well, if you had somebody worth a damn, why don't you just announce it? Well, maybe he was waiting for his broadcast partner, because dude, the CW, I know some fans might be rolling their eyes, but you just gave the numbers to Women of Wrestling. Like, they're pulling more than Impact. And with a lot of the negative press, the Nick Aldis, the Tyrus, all even back to Zicky Dice when he left, like there's always been kind of negativity around Corgan. Corgan has an opportunity here to really show himself as a pretty sly, smart booker if his cards are handled correctly here, if he plays his cards right. Because if you're moving over to the CW, Women of Wrestling are over there on CW affiliates doing great numbers. Do we see a partnership with them?
True.
Do we see Billy kind of really bolster his roster, his women's division, with a loose partnership with WOW? Another thing, this is for two shows. Obviously, we're getting NWA Power on the CW, which is huge, but also they want that reality show. And I know every time a reality show gets brought up, Ms. and Mrs., Total Bellas, even AEW's Roads to the Top, or, AEW All Access, fans kind of roll their eyes. When it's a bigger promotion like that, I kind of understand the eye roll. But when it's NWA on a network that goes out to a lot of people, and it's not just wrestling, you have a figurehead that holds weight and popularity beyond wrestling. Billy Corgan is a big, renowned, notable, very recognizable rock star. Smashing Pumpkins, a lot of people know him as that. If you wrap up a reality show that's showing the behind the scenes mechanics and world of a pro wrestling company that is ran by a 90s rock star, people will tune in just for the sheer freak show aspect of what is this about?
Right.
I think you have an opportunity here to truly grow your base and your fans with a reality show on NWA. Look at the success of the Netflix show with Al Snow. What's it called? The Wrestlers?
Yeah, with the OVW
People
showcase.
are loving that. People are loving that. And Al Snow's getting attention. OVW is getting attention. They're locking down local broadcast deals where their shows are being shown in Lexington, Louisville, all of these shows kind of in that tri-state area of OVW in Kentucky and Ohio. So they're getting love there. Now you put a company like NWA that does have some recognizable wrestlers, and then you throw the rock star Billy Corgan's in it. I think you might see some success with that reality show that's going to up your promotion. With this deal, if done correctly, if they don't throw the belt on like a Tyrus and turn off wrestling fans, I think you're going to bring fans into it that are maybe just curious of Billy Corgan. I think you're going to get more eyes on you. And I think this is really going to press Impact And I'm telling you what, man, I am all for everybody's talking about AEW and WWE going back and forth. I hope we get a little war between our number 3 and I guess you could say number 4 spot now, NWA and Impact TNA going back and forth to vie for that 3rd spot. That's fun and that is great for pro wrestling.
And especially too, I think it was always the choice for NWA to live on cable, especially where a lot of their fan base is nostalgia driven. And if you have a person that's 50 plus years old, maybe a little bit older, is cruising through the channels, they're more apt to find this if they see, the old blue blazer with whoever standing in front of a podium, cutting that promo with that classic set. You got the flags hanging behind the ring. You would think you're watching a rerun, but no, it's actually 2023. And you figure out I can watch this weekly and follow the storylines. This feels like when I was a kid. And I think that's the market they're driving towards by trying to capture the imagination of the newer fans of, the people that are clamoring for a time that they didn't live in, simpler times that wrestling used to be in the studio. And this has all endless amounts of possibility for NWA to secure a new fan base that was never going to come to YouTube, never going to subscribe to Fight TV. You have to have accessibility to have the eyes on your product. And I think once you have those eyes, they have to do a good job of keeping those eyes. And that is a different task, separate of the task. But the thing is, too, you mentioned the reality TV show, and I was going to mention the OVW thing because I have people in my life that I get message from. They know that I'm a diehard wrestling fan, asking me about OVW because they saw it on Netflix, and that just speaks volumes to me. That that's an entry point for a casual fan where they may watch Total Divas or Total Bellas or a reality TV show about OVW and listen to Al Snow talk about his promotion at large, more so than sitting down and watching an hour TV show put on, because they need a gateway. They need a reason to watch. They need a reason to watch pro wrestling. And it might be that draw. And to me, I'm not watching the reality TV show. I wasn't going to watch the AEW unscripted, whatever they were doing. It's not for me, but I understand why it exists. And this is the perfect tag team of things on the CW to bridge the gap, because someone's going to catch eyes on this reality TV show. And then they're going to say, I want to follow up the characters that I'm getting to know here behind the scenes. Maybe they like Camille. Maybe they, for whatever reason, they get attached to, anyway, EC3 might resonate with them and they want to see what he's doing in the ring. And then all of a sudden you have a fan that's going to seek them out on the CW. By the very least, you're casting a wider net that is going to be able to secure way more views, because it's just very traditional level of viewing where like you're going to get those eyes that are just cruising through. And cord cutters are becoming the majority, but there are still people that rely on whatever's on TV I'm going to watch, and they're going to get some of that audience. And some of that audience happens to be the older demographic, which would resonate with them. This product would resonate with them because of what it represents. It's old school wrestling.
Yeah, and what a windfall for CW, because you're going to get fans coming in to watch this. CW is going to benefit off of the pro wrestling fan DVR, locking this in for their DVR or tuning in live. And then NWA is going to benefit from the channel flippers, the CW watchers that are going to catch this on TV. There is a hunger for nostalgia. There is a hunger for studio wrestling. I think this is a win-win for the network. I think this is a win-win for the promotion. We look at that deal that MLW made. I forget the service they were through. It was the one WWE locked in the deal with, and kind of MLW got pushed out because of that Peacock deal.
Oh, Reels, yeah.
Reels. They were doing great numbers. Like MLW, I believe their first show did almost 200,000, and that's MLW. Not to disparage the company, but these smaller networks, and not that CW is a smaller network, it's not ABC, it's not Fox, but I love that they're scouring for these promotions, and places like MLW, NWA, Impact are kind of benefiting from, like we said at the top of the show, the hunger for live sports and live wrestling on cable to keep people from cutting the cord. I think this is exciting. I hope it brings back NWA power to its glory days prior to the pandemic, because I mean, NWA Power on YouTube in 2019, prior to the pandemic, man, they were firing on all cylinders. So I'm excited for this. I'm really excited for this.
So if we go back to the end of September, which is about a month ago at this point, we saw the deal get locked down with SmackDown going to USA there, and the amount was staggering: $287 million per year. I think over the course of 4 years, putting the deal almost over $1 billion, if not over $1 billion, if I do the math right. Point being is that those left out in the cold are not willing to invest that much into wrestling. Have to look at, why would NBC Universal want to do that? Why would Warner Brothers Discovery want to invest that amount of money? And a company like CW, we don't have the amount yet. We don't have the ability to see what it costs. I can guarantee you it's not $287 million per year, but it's going to be, it would make sense, because I think if they're paying them even $12 million a year, whatever it costs to keep them on the network, that bridges the gap. I think they can say, well, if WWE is very hot and there's a crossover of wrestling fans that just like watching live wrestling, there's got to be something to it. So I think the CW is an example of things that are going to happen in the future, where other wrestling promotions are going to get the opportunity, because they're seeing where everyone's trying to follow the path of getting in before something peaks. And we're seeing the CW say, well, NWA is kind of hurting brand right now. They definitely don't have momentum. They don't have the buzz they did back, as you referenced, 2019. I think if they would have went for a TV deal back in 2019, maybe they would have had more luck and maybe more suitors. But I think it works for both sides here. And I think TNA needs to look at this and say, we should be able to do something like this. I'd have to look at the list of TV channels that would probably want this, and unassuming ones like the CW, like they're not historically this like stalwart in the wrestling TV game, but I think there's got to be other channels out there that are just struggling. Like, we can't just run Jurassic Park over and over again on our TV screen. We need to have something that's consistent for people to tune in on. So, CW tried their hand with WOW, and now they're here at NWA, and they're probably like, hey man, this is working out for us. And NWA is going to get more eyes on it than Women of Wrestling just will.
And hats off to WOW. Wow. Women of Wrestling, if it wasn't for them, maybe CW doesn't even flirt with NWA.
Right.
They showed CW like, hey, there's eyes. Like, if we get someone else, that could be exciting. Last thing I'll say on this, the thing that makes it very exciting that you need to look at and everyone needs to think about, we've been very critical of NWA post-pandemic when they lost a lot of their roster. People forget, at one point prior to the pandemic, NWA had Eddie Kingston, NWA had Ricky Starks, NWA had LA Knight as Eli Drake. Those three guys are very popular for AEW and WWE right now. They had a very impressive roster prior to the pandemic. And the thing I love about this TV deal with the CW, with a little more money, means they can spend a little more money on roster, which means it's great for wrestlers. Wrestlers can have another place to ply their trade. Some of this talent that's in GCW, some of this talent that's maybe at MLW and wants to play the field, now there's a place where they can get paid a little more and go do their thing. Billy Corgan has a little bit of money in the coffers to spread out and not have to really throw all his money in on an EC3 to bring over, and then he doesn't have as much to build out his roster. Now he can build that roster out. Now, and he has young guys. Like, I think of the Thrillbilly. That dude is a star in waiting. I'm a big fan of Thrillbilly. I think he holds their North American title right now, possibly, but he has some young talent, but now he can really, we don't know the numbers, we don't know the deal, but obviously there's going to be more money coming into NWA with a network deal. So I'm excited to see how Billy spreads that money out. What talent does he bring in with this new amount of change in his pocket? That's the thing. I want to see how they build off of this. I want to see what we watch, what on our TV can we see a change in with the new money, the influx of money coming in.
100%. And I think it also provides another platform for independent wrestlers to eventually have
Absolutely.
a secure placement too. So, and the talent is as rich as ever. If you're not following the independents, I mean, the Northeast and beyond are just absolutely, I'm using Northeast and beyond wrestling is fantastic, but also other places that are working territories that continually just showcase. I mean, there's some of the best young talent we're going to be seeing on our screens in the next 10 years that, I mean, keep an eye out, and NWA might be a place that they could scoop them up, because if you're going to these independent shows, the work rate is just, man, it's bar none. It's no longer just this like, backyard type of like, oh, we're just going to go out for, some beers and watch some live wrestling. Man, they're putting on matches that you'd be amazed to see on TV. So
It's fun. It's fun too, man, because now, MLW and Impact were really the places that were scooping up some of that very talented indie wrestlers that maybe AEW and WWE weren't really looking at.
yeah,
Now you have NWA stepping into that fold. It's just offering another place where talented guys can make a name for themselves. Because NWA, it's like, they're vying against TNA, and they can say, hey, you can go to TNA and be a low to mid card guy that they'll build you, but we want to bring you in at a discounted rate maybe, but we're going to push you and we're going to feature you more so you'll get to show more of yourself. It's going to be a lot of fun to see where some of this independent talent gets to ply their trade.
wrestling continues to thrive. Let's get to big story number 3.
Big Story 3.
So we got the announcement back on Wednesday during Dynamite that Sting will have his retirement match at AEW Revolution 2024. So he went on this great promo interacting with the fans, saying that his debut for AEW was at Revolution 2021. And 3 years later, full circle, he'll be having his final match. He didn't say who he's going to be wrestling. He did finish the promo by saying that the only thing for sure about Sting is that his retirement is for sure, making it clear that he's not going to go back on his word. The promo on Wednesday was awesome, man. He kind of went through his career, talked about the history of wrestling. He mentioned names like Lex Luger, Hulk Hogan, and then, of course, mentioning Ric Flair, probably his biggest rival. He thanked him for putting him on the map at that first Clash of Champions and later at the 1990 Great American Bash, where he won the NWA World title. Apropos that we're bridging into this conversation with the legacy of NWA. And he did discuss his time in WWE, didn't mention him by name, but said post WWE, he was considering just being retired, and how it ended didn't sit well with him. It didn't sit well with a lot of fans, young Stingers that grew up. They didn't want to see him go out that way. I'm sure you felt the same way.
Yeah.
But I mean, now the conjecture begins. His career is ending in February. That's the one thing we know for sure. How do we book it out? I know you and I, in the preview of All In, we were kind of waxing poetic about maybe ending his career at Wembley and maybe challenging MJF for the title at the time, or maybe wrestling Jericho. Do you have any clues about where you think they're going to go, or are you just kind of waiting and seeing?
I really don't know where they go. There's a part of me that thinks it's him and Darby, but I don't think it's some like, I don't think you turn Darby heel or anything. Darby is a perennial baby face for me. But it would be a passing of the torch. The man with the paint gives the man with the paint the rub, his protege. There's also, you can always go legend versus legend. They teased that Jericho match where they kind of looked at each other. I think Jericho really would love to get in the ring with him. I don't know if that's the right move, though. I really don't know where they go with Sting's final match. I just know this guy, he has had, in my opinion, the best Legends run of anyone. I mean, outside of, you can always say Undertaker, but I'm talking like someone who's pretty much there week to week, who's very, very active, not being trotted out on your marquee event once a year. Like, no one has had a run like this. People can trash AEW for their booking decisions here and there, everywhere. But the one thing I feel like, if you trash the way they've handled Sting, you completely invalidate your opinion, because this is the way it is done. And I think that makes some people sour, because attached to the way AEW did it so well with Sting is juxtaposed with the way WWE did not handle Sting correctly. And you're right, Ace. I was one of those unhappy Stingers at WrestleMania. 32? Was it 32, 31?
It was 31 in San Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah, they botched it. I mean, from all they put a bunch of gaga at the end with the NWO and DX to make fans think the match was good. The match sucked. And the way they bring the NWO out to help Sting sucked. They're mortal enemies, dude. I know he joined the Wolfpack, but a lot of fans don't remember that. We remember Crow Sting against Black and White NWO. I'm happy to see him go out on top. I think they're going to really ramp this up. At least I hope they do. I hope the lead up to this is every time Sting's in a city, it's billed as the last time Sting will be in Kansas City, the last time Sting will be in Charlotte. They need to really put the pomp and circumstance on this final run to Revolution. He's my all-time guy. I mean, Jericho is my favorite. Like, if I had to make a list, I love Jericho, but Sting was my first real guy. I mean, I was a Hogan guy. I was an Ultimate Warrior kid, just like everybody else, but Sting was, I remember when he won the NWA world title from Flair at Great American Bash 1990. 1990 was the year where I was 7-8 years old. That was the year for me where I can remember tracking wrestling. Like, I'd watched wrestling before. I remember Andre the Giant choking Bob Uecker. I have early wrestling memories that predate that. But as far as remembering the week-to-week story, that started around 90-91 for me. And that was at the height of the Surfer Sting babyface. And I have so much respect for this guy. It's bittersweet, man. When he was giving that speech, I gotta tell you, I had a little bit of a tear in my eye, because this is a guy, his career has spanned my wrestling fandom. And I think there's a lot of people around my age that feel the same. Like, this is like closing the door of my childhood, like finality, where this isn't Ric Flair coming back years later to do a match in his 70s. This is a guy who has always felt viable and not like a freak show. Let's bring out the old guy to give him a spot. Like, Sting has always felt special to me. He's never felt past his prime or anything like that. And he spoke to it in the retirement speech, or not retirement speech, but announcing his retirement. He spoke about how I may not move like I used to. And that's true. He's not Sting 97. He's not Sting 1990. He's not even Sting 2005. But the way they've protected him and showcased him has made him feel legit, has made him feel like a legend. And from where I'm standing, and maybe this is just my WCW early 90s wrestling fandom nostalgia, rose-colored glasses, whatever you want to call it. But from where I'm standing, Sting is the biggest legend in pro wrestling that was not created by WWE. I know there's going to be people that say Antonio Inoki, and there's New Japan guys that are big, but as far as in America, and I would argue worldwide, Sting is the most synonymous legend. Like, there's a reverence with him that does not attach itself to anyone else other than Sting. I know Ric Flair wasn't built by WWE, but he had those runs, winning the 92 Rumble, his late run with Evolution. Like, he had enough in WWE where he kind of, he doesn't fit that mold for me. Sting, outside of that one WrestleMania and that match against Seth Rollins where he got injured, outside of that, I kind of wiped my feet of that. Everything else, this guy was WCW and TNA to the core. He was the bright, shining example of, you can be a global wrestling star without Stanford putting the machine behind you. So I'm excited to see this final run. I hope they give it the pomp and circumstance it deserves. I hope Revolution 2024 pulls out all the stops. I hope they bring in people from his past that they're able to, that aren't attached to Legends deals with WWE. I just want to see the man get the send-off he deserves. And judging by his run in AEW, I think they're going to follow through on that.
Yeah, and we were talking about retirement match, but you're right. I think they could do things on the way to February to make it feel big. And it could be we can get the Jericho match somewhere between now and February. It could be in January. It could be in December. We could find a way to put that on TV, drive a rating on Dynamite. They could utilize this in a perfect way. And, putting an end cap on his career. You mentioned, him starting his career in WCW, started in 87 and all those moments that came with it. 1985 was when he started working in Memphis and Mid-South. But I think the Sting that we know was WCW 1987, where he grew from Surfer Sting to Crow Sting and became this, legend, like you said, outside. And when WCW closed its doors in 2001, he kind of stayed out. He held out for a long period of time until
people thought he was going to retire then.
And he easily could have took that paycheck. I'm sure that, he was offered to go to the Invasion angle. And I know they probably wanted him there because he is WCW and they would rather have him involved. But I think following what he did, he made the right decision. And then watching, like you said, signing with AEW in December 2020, who knew the impact it would have on their roster and where Darby Allin is. It's not only because of Sting, but it certainly helped him elevate to eventually, I think he's going to be a world champion.
Darby would not be where he's at today if it was not for Sting. I mean, the way they tied them, Darby would be somewhere because he's a talent and he's incredible. But Sting added legitimacy to this kid. And I think, talk about the rub, that kid's going to carry that rub with him his entire career now. That attachment to Sting, it's vitally important for Darby. And man,
and it wasn't just this pat on the back, raise his hand in the one-off moment. This has been 3 years, going on 4 years together. It's crazy.
It's incredible, man. I just look at Sting as he's one of those guys. He is a top 10 all-time figure in the sport. I'm not saying he's the best wrestler. I'm not saying technique. I'm just saying as far as star, when you make your list, he's right up there with the Hogans, the Warriors, the Rocks, the Stone Colds. He's right in the mix.
And he continues to give back to the business today. And then we mentioned Progressive Minds. That would, similar to Terry Funk, where he's able to see, the forest through the trees, as cliche as that might sound. He sees the bigger picture about where wrestling is, trying to leave it better than where he left it. And I can certainly say wrestling's in a better place now because of Sting. Because of things that he's done in the ring and out of it. So kudos to Sting. All the flowers, brother.
All the flowers to Sting. And I hope, Tony's a big New Japan fan. He's a big, Japanese wrestling fan. He would be well serviced to look at the way the Great Muta went out. The way that final tour went with the Great Muta, how they really put the pomp and circumstance behind that. I would use that as a template on how to send off Sting because they really amped it up and made it feel special. And that's what I want. I don't want this to just be like Sting kind of is on the roster and then, 2-3 weeks before Revolution, we start ramping it up. Start it now. This is Sting's final tour with his fans. That's what longtime Stingers want to see.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, you have the bolts in the chamber. They're never going to be used again. Shoot them off and use it on Dynamite. Use it on Collision. Use it on other platforms, these big events. He made his debut at Winter is Coming. We're going to see that return. We'll talk about that in the news, but that's his home. I mean, that's where he came in. Winter is Coming is the Sting AEW canon. So, yeah, I'm curious to see where this goes. And honestly, I hope he just has creative control to figure out what he wants to do and what he wants it to look like, whether it's Darby, Jericho, whether it's somebody else he sees, or maybe it's another historic match that's not in-house. Those are all possibilities because he deserves to have that creative control.
And I wouldn't be shocked if Tony puts him over. I think Sting wants to go out on his back, but I think it's going to be a tearjerker moment at Revolution.
With that being said, let's get to the quick hitters. We have a whole bunch to get through. Quick hitters. All right, so we're going to be jumping into the land of WWE for the first time tonight, and we're going to be talking about Bianca Belair. She made her WWE return after 2 months away. She returned on SmackDown during the closing segment following the Io Sky versus Charlotte Flair Women's Championship match. Sky did defeat Charlotte with interference from Damage Control, and Bayley and Dakota Kai and Damage Control continued to attack Flair after the bell, and that signaled Bianca back in. So 2 months gone. She's been well missed, but I think this also segues into eventually a big-time program with Jade Cargill.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something all the fans are wanting to see, those two face off when they really ramp up Jade from an in-ring standpoint. I mean, how do you not like Bianca Belair coming back? She's one of the best talents they have, and that I just hope the storytelling really ramps up because they've got a lot of talented women, and I think AEW and WWE have a lot of talented women, but they're not giving them the amount of story that they give the men. I want to see more story. I'm kind of tired of Bianca in the way she's being presented. I want to see a change. I want to see something different. I feel like she's kind of burned herself out a little bit from just the character standpoint. So, but I'm happy to have her back. She's awesome.
She's been John Cena-fied. That's what's exactly what it is.
100%.
So in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer provided an update on The Rock and his status for WrestleMania 40. So we heard Dwayne Johnson say in the Pat McAfee show this past September that him facing Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 39 was locked in at one point. He didn't say it wasn't going to happen at WrestleMania 40, leading everyone to believe. But we got Sports Illustrated reporting earlier this week that the decision about WrestleMania will not be in The Rock to make, nor is the main event even a topic of substance. And there are currently no plans for this to happen. So Dave Meltzer said through his sources, he said, if he wants the spot, I can't believe WWE would turn him down. But after Johnson turned it down last year, nobody's going with the idea he's going to do it this year. And essentially said, regarding the stories that WWE won't do Rock versus Reigns at Mania, if Rock wants to do it, what we were told is if he wants a spot, then he can have it. And the belief is that Johnson will have plenty of work once the strikes are over and he'll have plenty to do. What we were told is The Rock is not going to come back and win the title. I'd never anticipate that would be the issue of the match. I always figured Reigns was going to win and The Rock would be retiring in the ring. So outside of this 6-second Eric Rowan squash match at WrestleMania 32, we haven't seen him in the ring since facing John Cena in the main event at 29. Are we going to see The Rock eventually wrestle? I mean, the clock continues to tick in this direction. Has the ship sailed? If it doesn't happen at 40, are we not going to get Rock versus Roman?
I mean, at this, like, the wrestling fan in me says you got to have him one more match. You know, he's there. He looks like he's in shape. Maybe not ring shape, but the dude is a jacked powerhouse. But my wrestling mind says we'll see him eventually. But then the other side, like, maybe we don't. You know, the movie career, it's not popping. I mean, it's not like he's putting on all these crowd-pleasing movies, but at the same time, he's very successful. He's got the XFL going on. Maybe he's just too busy to give that final send-off. But man, 10 years since his last Mania appearance, now or never, dude. And my only thing with this, it's like you trot him out on SmackDown, you pop this major rating. Like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm kind of tired of this, like, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Either do it or don't. Like, Cody is the story that you're telling, so I would respect them if they locked in on that and just saw that through. But I'm tired of muddying it up with The Rock. Either make a plan and everyone get on the same page and lock into the plan, or stop with this like last minute change because The Rock wants to do it and he's a major star. I'm kind of getting wore thin on that, honestly.
Completely agree. And we'll definitely follow the story. If The Rock, I still believe if The Rock wants to do it, they're doing it. But
100%.
So we have Darby Allin and he's dealing with an injured shoulder. So he hasn't wrestled since Wrestle Dream on October 1st, but he did take part in that brawl with Nick Wayne that we saw in the Dynamite that was back in Texas. But he appeared at Nitro Circus in Texas this week, and they had a show in Fort Worth. And unfortunately for everybody, Darby Allin performed a stunt jump at the event and mentioned his shoulder injury when addressing the live audience. He said, quote, "I'm not doing too good. My shoulder, I think, is fractured." And then he proceeded to do the jump and landed right on the fractured shoulder. Yeah, so Darby being Darby, but and he's got the face tattoo, which we were mentioning before. So Darby marches the beat of his own drum, but I would wish he would just kind of take it easy on the shoulder. I understand he wants to climb Mount Everest. He wants to do things like the Nitro Circus, making jumps on his motorbike. But goddamn, dude, like, we want you in the ring.
Yeah, Travis Pastrana and Nitro Circus is just too good for Darby to pass up. Here's the thing, man. He's a wild man. He's not here for a long time. He's here for a good time. If you guys like Darby, soak it up, because I don't think he's going to be pulling a Sting and retiring at 64, 65. I love this about Darby, though. I love it. Like as a fan, yeah, I want to see him in the ring. I don't want him to jeopardize that. But at the same time, this crazy bastard, this is why I love him. So there's a part of me, it's like AEW they don't need him. They have a roster where they can feature a ton of guys while he does flips with a fractured shoulder, but I would much rather see him carrying it up in an AEW ring. But I love the guy. I love that he's a crazy bastard who does stuff like this, and he's climbing Mount Everest, for God's sakes. How could you not love this crazy asshole?
So we have a new trios team featuring Adam Copeland, Dax Harwood, and Cash Wheeler could be forming in AEW because we saw Adam Copeland and FTR filed a trademark for the name Rated FTR for wrestling purposes back on Wednesday, October 18th. So these filings were done through attorney Michael E. Dawkins on behalf of Wheeler, Harwood, and through the Wet Yeti Incorporated company filed the trademark potential nicknames for Copeland. So we've heard a lot of stuff here. I mean, FTR and Copeland appeared together in the final moments on Collision last week. All three wrestlers came out to save Bryan Danielson. During an interview following Wrestle Dream, Copeland listed FTR as people in the company he wants to work with. He did mention all these different places, potentially working in Mexico, working in Japan, but also we know they're friends. I mean, part of the reason that he came over to AEW is because his relationship with FTR and dream matches eventually Edge and Christian versus FTR, but kind of cool to see this story being told that they're going to be working together first, and we might see a trios championship run with them. Why not?
Absolutely. I think that's why FTR dropped those titles. At first, there was rumors of the injury that they had. That was all storyline. I think they were just cleaning themselves of those belts so they could lock up with Adam Cole and go after possibly the trios titles. Who knows? If you watched Collision last night, House of Black returned in full force. And there was an angle at the end of the show where Adam Copeland wasn't there, but FTR, Danielson, BCC were all kind of locking horns with House of Black. I think that's an easy pivot to bring Adam Copeland into that situation. If you got Adam Copeland and Malachi Black staring each other down while Buddy, Brody, Cash, and Dax stare each other down, sign me up.
So we also have former tag team partners Mike Santana and Ortiz are going to be taking on each other on AEW Rampage. So this was announced during this week's episode of Collision after weeks of vignettes explaining really just them breaking up, why they're breaking up. So the big thing here is the fact that it's being announced for Rampage. This is a big monumental feud that be like turning a shoot into a work type of stuff and blurring the lines and, all the stuff that went down with them off screen. Is this a good or bad move going to Rampage?
I guess you could look at it both ways. On one side, I'm like, man, this is such a good story. It needs a bigger platform. To me, this is a mid-card pay-per-view level match if built the right way. But on the other side, this is one of the premier storylines on Rampage. Everything outside of it, I think maybe a vignette here or there, everything between these two guys falling out has been built on Rampage. And I think that's what Rampage needs is storylines where this is happening on this show. I have to watch if I want to watch it. And just me, that's one of the things that gets me to watch Rampage is this type of stuff where I know these guys are mixing it up here. They're talking shit back and forth. I've been a big fan of what they're doing with these two guys. It seems a little soon. Like, why not hold off and do this match on Winter is Coming or even on Full Gear? But
right.
It's a bait. It's baiting people in to watch Rampage. If you're a diehard AEW fan who happens to not catch Rampage, if you hear, oh shit, Santana and Ortiz, that's happening on Rampage, I'm going to tune in.
So we also had some news in a post on Instagram. Undertaker announced he's launching a Patreon for a project he's calling 6 Feet Under with Mark Calloway. So they said this project will feature in-depth conversations with a Hall of Fame wrestler. So there's a lot of press and, release and information about this, but essentially what you know from this is Undertaker starting a podcast. So there's a lot on this, and potentially when it launches, and they listed the tiers. They said that for $5 a month, $6 per month, and $10 per month, the lowest tier will get access to episodes on Wednesday mornings when the show launches. The other two tiers will get early access on Monday. Those who subscribe to the $10 tier will be able to submit questions to the Undertaker to answer in future episodes. So it's unclear when this is starting. but it seems like Undertaker he went full blown, get rid of kayfabe, brother, and he's going to try to capitalize. And this is going to get huge ratings, man. People want to hear what Taker, because it's not only what he wants to talk about the past, which would be awesome to hear him talk about, but him commenting on the current state of wrestling. I understand it's inundated with people, but who better than Undertaker to get in that landscape? Because if all these other guys are making money on it, Mark Calloway's opinion holds way more weight than a lot of different guys.
Yeah, I'm so done on pro wrestlers talking about wrestling. Like, it's so saturated, and there's a lot of like bitter old wrestlers. Conrad kind of cornered the market on that. But I will say, if there's one wrestler I want to hear his take on shit, it's Undertaker. I don't know if I'm going to pay for the podcast. I guess you have to if you want to listen. So
I think listen early, maybe. I don't know.
I'll definitely be listening. Man, Undertaker spilling the beans on the business. Sign me up. That's the one guy I want to hear his takes. That's the one guy. His stories. Can you imagine the amount of interesting things he has to say?
I mean, the bad part about this is inevitably he's going to make people upset with his opinion and some of the stuff. And like, you even hear some people, from the documentaries and the interviews, they feel a certain type of way that they're disillusioned with the character now or whatever. But we saw the feedback of Dax Harwood. I mean, all these other podcasts get bad heat. So I would just be curious to see if there's still a unanimous love for The Undertaker following the podcast being around for a year. It should be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have Ace Steel brought in as a producer for Impact. So PW Insider reports Ace Steel was brought in to work for a tryout during Bound for Glory. And obviously this started people talking. Does that mean CM Punk is imminent? We obviously didn't see CM Punk at Bound for Glory, but Ace Steel working as a producer, he did that prior to returning to AEW. Well, the interest was out there and the conversations continued. So this is a good get for them.
Yeah, it's a good get. And if you hear, I know he's got the stink on him from the whole CM Punk situation, but if you hear everybody talk, even in AEW, he was respected. People liked the work he was doing. So if he can go ply his trade at Impact, and maybe that does offer a little bait to Phil Brooks to test the waters over there. Maybe, he hears stories from Ace Steel. Hey man, this locker room, I think you could bring something to it. I would be in for that. It would show me that for CM Punk, it's not just about the big paycheck from the big promotion. Right. Like, he truly loves wrestling and he wants to give back to a promotion that maybe isn't getting the love. So Ace still being there, I'm all for it, man. I hope they sign him. I hope he adds to the roster, because, outside of biting Kenny Omega, it's been pretty good reviews for the guy.
So also at AEW, we saw Sami Callihan's contract expire at Impact, and there was conversation about his relationship with Moxley, being able to work as producer. Well, he was there at AEW Collision in Memphis, so he'll apparently there working at the details and maybe working on it as an on-screen talent as well as a producer. So maybe we'll see Sami Callihan in the fold with AEW.
Possibly. I think there's telltale signs that Mox would maybe want to revisit that tag team they had back in their independence. If Mox and Sami Callihan joined the tag division, that could be interesting. Who knows what BCC the future holds in store for them? I don't see Sami being a BCC member. He's more of a wild card, but Sami Callihan in AEW is very interesting.
So we saw the return of Jon Moxley and House of Black on Collision on Saturday. So we saw an angle being shot with all these different personalities. And we know Moxley had been out of action since AEW Dynamite Grand Slam, where he had the match against Rey Fenix. They had to call an audible, wound up losing the international title. But as a trio, the House of Black had been gone from AEW TV since All In back in late August. So when they lost the trios titles to the Acclaimed, we saw, Brody with Julia Hart when she challenged Chris Statlander, but for the most part, Matthews and Black have been off TV since losing the trios title, so it's great to see them back.
Yeah, I think Malachi was dealing with a bit of an injury. He spoke to that on one of his Instagram lives, but
calf tear, that's what they said.
Yeah, I love the way they brought them back on Collision. If you watch Collision, they were in 3 segments. He jumped Danielson after the opening match. He comes in, all 3 members jump FTR during their match, and then they feature in the main event. So I'm hoping everyone's getting in Tony's ear and being like, man, we have these guys. We have to mix them up with the top dudes. And for House of Black to be in there scrapping with Moxley, Danielson, Ricky Starks was in there, like FTR. This is how we want our House of Black. We want them at the top of the card.
So we also had Matt Riddle file a new trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So he patented King of Bros registration for wrestling contests and entertainment. So prior to everything else happen in WWE, he's going to bring back the King of Bros section of his character. So we shall see. This was filed on October 18th.
Yeah, King of Bros. That was the moniker he was using on the Indies when he kind of did the knockoff of the Budweiser T-shirt.
Right.
This lets us know as fans, hey, he could be entering into the fold of free agency. Where does he land? I hope he lands in Impact. I really do. I think if he can keep his shit together, that's all to be determined. But man, he would be fun seeing him link up with Josh Alexander and things of that nature. So we'll see.
So Conan was talking about Bryan Danielson. He told everybody that Danielson wanted to work in Mexico, but Danielson's arm injury put the idea on hold. So Conan said, I saw him in AEW and I asked him if he wanted to do something in Mexico. And he said, yeah, I brought up a couple of people. Then either that week or the next, he fractured his forearm. We never talked. I have to talk to him again. I would love to work with him. So it would be really all these different possibilities. Like obviously we talked about G1 working in Japan. I know there's limited amount of marks on the bump card waiting for Bryan Danielson, but I would love to see him working in Arena Mexico and with AAA or maybe even CMLL. I know Conan has nothing to do with them, but seeing him mix it up with Lucha Legends in that environment, hell yeah.
Oh yeah. Danielson in Mexico, sign me up.
We also had Tuesday night's episode of WWE NXT average 798,000 viewers on the USA Network, which was down 13.4% from last week's loaded episode. So just want to keep that in mind here, just kind of show exactly where they are. And they had tough competition with the NLB playoffs and stuff, but I understand Tuesday and Wednesday, AEW back to where they are, and now NXT is back to where they are. But it's still the fifth highest audience total NXT has drawn in 2023. But the four before that broke the record. But I just want to let everybody know, like it wasn't going to stay close to 1 million.
Right? Yeah. If NXT came out and beat Dynamite without their Undertakers and Cenas of the world, then it's like, okay, I get it, but this is kind of how we expected it to happen.
So we also, Chris Jericho had two quotes here from different things. And he said he's not overthinking AEW's loss to NXT when the two brands went head to head. He essentially said, you can only bring in Cena and Undertaker and Cody and everybody so much because nobody wants to work on their secondary show all the time. And it was fun a little, hey, fuck you AEW. I didn't really worry about it. It was just an opportunity to stick it to us. Stunt casting. He also said, I told Tony, well, if you want to fire back, bring in Shaq and Snoop Dogg and those types of guys. But he said Tony didn't want to do that. He said he wanted to rely on the shows and our guys and girls, and that's the way it's always been for us. So he was pretty heated here in this interview, kind of taking shots and talking about the competition, saying it's good for fans, it's good for companies. And again, Jericho as candid as always.
I love it. I love that Tony stuck with the talent. I wish NXT would have done that. I wish they would have relied on their young talent because I think their young talent's more talented than they give them credit for, trotting out Cena, Undertaker, Cody, all those. And I love what Jericho also said he tells WWE, don't get too far up your own ass because you didn't do that good of a job as far as crushing us. And our show was better than theirs, quite frankly. So it doesn't bother me. Keep spitting it, Jericho. I love it.
So we also have Adam Copeland talking about wanting to wrestle at the Tokyo Dome in Arena Mexico, talks possibly doing the G1 Climax, had some great quotes. And obviously this was all paired together with the dream matchups, but he said it's pretty exciting, and byproduct coming here is like, oh, wait, hold on a second. Tokyo Dome, that's on the checklist. He continued Arena Mexico. I went there once. I was world champion, but I wore a mask because I wanted to watch the show. I snuck in and watched the show with a mask on and had a blast. I love the culture of Lucha Libre and the pageantry. Those two things would be cool as a lifelong wrestling fan. Those experiences would be cool, and I didn't know they would ever be in the cards. He also was asked about the G1 Climax. He said, well, I guess Eddie Kingston did this year, so it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So all these things are open. Adam Copeland is just, thinking big picture, and this is a lot of fun to think about possibility.
Absolutely, man. Him and Japan's fun.
So just to give an update on what we announced yesterday with Final Battle 2023, we talked about being on the Hammerstein Ballroom. I think everyone thought it would be, but apparently it was confirmed it's not going to be. Friday, December 15th, it's going to be in Garland, Texas. So everyone was kind of hoping they would be taking their place back in New York City. That's not going to happen. Maybe putting some feelers out for the interest was precautionary to see if like maybe there is an interest to bring it back to New York City, but no, we're going to get it back in Garland, Texas.
They'll be there one day, I'm sure.
So we also had Bill Simmons saying that the upcoming docuseries on Vince McMahon has a chance to be pretty spectacular. And he also said that Vince McMahon won't get the final say. That's been a lot of pieces of the news, that it's going to be stripping away different opinions and the veneer that's on top of Vince McMahon. So this should be definitely a must watch.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. A multi-part docuseries on Vince McMahon, and Vince has no say in what's being put in the docuseries. Let's do it.
So you guys can find that on Netflix early next year. And Bill Simmons was very confident that everyone's going to be happy with it. So early reports are that it's going to be can't miss.
Hell yeah.
All right, let's get to the week ahead and preview what's coming up in the week of wrestling.
The week ahead.
All right, for the week ahead in wrestling, as you're watching this, the NXT Women's Champion Becky Lynch is on Raw defending against Indy Hartwell. Logan Paul is appearing. Drew McIntyre versus Sami Zayn. The New Day, Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods taking on the Alpha Academy, Chad Gable and Otis. And Giovanni Vinci versus Johnny Gargano here on Raw. We also have on Tuesday the NXT Halloween Havoc Night 1 stack card. NXT Women's Championship Becky Lynch defending against Lyra Valkyria. NXT Tag Team titles, Tony D'Angelo and Stacks defending against Chase U. We have a lights out match between Gigi Dolan and Blair Davenport. The Devil's Playground, Roxanne Perez versus Kiana James. Lexis King making his in-ring debut in 2 NXT Breakout Tournament semifinals. Lola Vice versus Carmen Petrovic and Ariana Grace versus Kalani Jordan. On
Pretty
Dynamite,
good.
Chad, we have a stack card. The Dynamite Diamond Ring. MJF defending against Juice Robinson. We get the ROH 6-man titles on the line. Hangman Page and the Young Bucks, a.k.a. the Hung Bucks, defending against the Hardys and Brother Zay. The AEW Women's Champion Hikaru Shida defends against Ruby Soho. Okada and Orange Cassidy versus Bryan Danielson and Claudio. Tony Khan will give a gift to Sting. Chris Jericho will sit down with Renee Paquette, and Rob Van Dam and Hook will team together. Holy shit.
Pretty
dude.
loaded.
On Thursday, we have Impact. We have Alex Shelley versus John Gresham for the Impact Championship, and we also have Ospreay versus Josh Alexander in the Chicago Fallout tapings.
Huge matches.
On SmackDown, Roman Reigns and LA Knight will sign their contract for Crown Jewel. Rey Mysterio and Santos Escobar will take on the Street Profits.
Nice.
And then on Collision, we have MJF and Kenny Omega appearing together, which will be 13 days from the last night. They had that segment. It will be October 31st. It's when MJF passes Omega for the longest AEW World Championship reign. So
I'm excited for that. That's very interesting.
And then also the last two things, we have NWA Sam Hain coming up, 10/28, main evented by the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. EC3 defends against Tom Latimer with Camille. A whole bunch of other title matches. It's a big get for them because this is a precursor to their TV deal.
Yeah. I'm going to be checking that out. EC3, Tom Latimer.
Don't forget to check out Kenzie Page defending against Ruthie J is going to be really good. And the tag team titles, Blunt Force Trauma, Carnage, and Damage with Aaron Stevens will take on Trevor Murdoch and Mike Knox. It could be a great card, Sam Hain.
Great card.
And then we have the New Japan Strong Fighting Spirit Unleashed October 28th. We have a lot of great matches. The Never Openweight Champion Tama Tonga will defend against Shingo Takagi. We have the Strong Women's Championship Julia defend against Hyen. We're going to get Filthy Tom Lawler versus Gabe Kidd. We have a whole bunch of other great matches on this card. Eddie Kingston defending against Hanari, his Openweight Championship match, his Strong Openweight Championship match, that is. So going to be a great weekend of wrestling coming up for the weekend before Halloween.
Yeah, good matches.
And that's all we got, man. I know we just breezed through a lot of those matches. It's jam-packed as always, but always a blast to do this with you, Chad.
Yeah, man. As always, great time. Guys, check out all of our shows. We'll be back next Monday. Go to theturnbuckletavern.com. We always keep it locked and loaded. Tons of news, tons of all that good stuff coming. All the shows, every night of the week, we have something. You know where to go, theturnbuckletavern.com. And until next Monday, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Reach for the sky, boy.